Toxic Biohazard is a versatile plugin that has been included with the FL Studio package for a long time. Its versatility means it can be used in a whole range of ways, and one great way of using it is to create bass sounds. Let's have a look at how to do that now. First of all, you want to make sure you've got an instance of Toxic Biohazard loaded by going up to your channel rack, hitting the Add New button, and selecting the Toxic Biohazard at the bottom of the drop-down menu. We've already got one loaded, so we're not actually going to click on it. Then what you want to make sure is that your program is reset on your Toxic Biohazard by hitting Options and then Reset Program. This resets all the settings to their default settings and their default values. Now what we're going to do is change our oscillators. First of all, you want to make sure oscillator 1 is off by clicking on the waveform, turning on oscillator 2 and making sure it's on the sine wave, turning on oscillator 3 and changing the wave by clicking on sine and selecting TX1. Make sure oscillator 4 is off, oscillator 5 is on, and select sine and hit sine 3 instead. And finally, select oscillator 6 and change this waveform to a square wave. What we're doing here is we're mixing in a whole different range of waveforms with all of our different oscillators or waveform generators in order to create an interesting and complex sound. The combination of all of these waveforms together is what gives your sound its main thrust and its main tonal quality. Now what we want to do is make sure that our oscillators are all coming through. At the moment, only oscillator 1 has been mixed to 100%, so we need to click on these 3 zeros here for oscillator 2 and drag this all the way up to 100 as well. Do the same for oscillator 3, oscillator 4, oscillator 5 and oscillator 6. Bear in mind, it also doesn't matter where in any of these 6 oscillators these different waveforms are located. This just happens to be the way that I created the patch, but for instance you could have the oscillator 2 waveform in oscillator 4 or the oscillator 5 waveform in oscillator 1. It doesn't make any difference as long as you've got all of these mixed to 100. It is also worth noting that all of these waveforms will generate quite a mid-heavy bass. You might even get better results layering this with a simple sine wave sub-bass that is slightly distorted to get a fatter sound. Now what we're going to do is detune some of these oscillators. So we're just going to detune them slightly by about 3 cents either way, 3 or 4. And you want to do this for every single oscillator, ideally going from plus to minus to plus on each one of your oscillators. Now what you want to do is go to oscillator 2, select the pitch, and make sure this is down by 12 or a whole octave. Then what you want to do is pitch oscillator 5 up by 12. So we go along up to here, select the pitch control, and select it so that it goes all the way up. Let's just play this back and see what it sounds like. As you can see, it sounds like quite a cheesy, mid-heavy bass, so it doesn't have much low tonal quality to it. And as I said, the best way of creating this bass is to layer it with a simple sine wave sub-bass that is slightly distorted. What we can do is we can turn oscillator 1 on and then pitch it down by about 12 or even 24 to get that kind of tonal quality. Let's just play it back now. And as you can hear, you can now hear that sub-bass coming through as well. Now what we want to do is we want to mix in our LFOs. So make sure you go down to your LFO1 here and it's selected to sine, and make sure that its sync is changed to 1/16. Then make sure that you're mixing this in to about 60 on oscillator 5. So select the 3 zeros and turn it up to about 60. Now what you want to do is turn on some of the settings. So you want to turn on lo-fi and a flanger. To do this, you simply select the chorus, change this to lo-fi, and you go over here to the other effects slot, click on delay, and change it to flanger. What you now want to do is make sure you've turned down the flanger mix and that you've turned down the lo-fi as well. And make sure both of these are turned on by hitting this little button here for both of them. Make sure that all of your oscillators are mixed into 100 and turn up the drive on the master setting. This instantly gives you a more interesting sound. Make sure also that you've turned up poly to 32 to give you the maximum number of polyphonic voices and unison voices up to 8. Now when we play this back, you'll get a very fat sound. The lo-fi is still coming through and is quite strong and is really distorting the sound. So what we might want to do is turn this off, just so that we get a bit of a cleaner sound. As you can see, we get a really grimy, crunchy, industrial kind of bass. This is just a starting point. You obviously can keep on experimenting and create your own sounds, and that is the best way with sound design, is to simply create your own sounds and see what you can come up with yourself. This kind of sound would be very useful for music such as dubstep or drum and bass or other electronic music elements like that. But if you want to create, for instance, a house bass or something like that, the best thing to do is to keep on experimenting.